Hello. In this video I'll be talking about the series One Piece, and my theories on who the people of the Ancient Kingdom were, why the world government is so afraid of the Void Century, and what the One Piece is. Before you continue watching, you should be warned that there will be spoilers from the end of the Zou arc. Let's begin with the Ancient Kingdom. Before we talk about what we don't know, let's list the things that we do. The Ancient Kingdom was the enemy of the early world government. Also, they worked with the Kozuki clan of Wano to create the poneglyphs, and hid them around the world. 4 of these poneglyphs are key to finding Raftel. Admittedly, this is not a lot to go on. Let's try to come up with what I think are some reasonable assumptions. First, Raftel is probably where the One Piece is hidden, and we know that the person who finds the One Piece becomes King of the Pirates. Also, because it's always been referred to as a kingdom rather than a country, it's reasonable to assume that it was ruled by a king. Finally, these poneglyphs are found all over the world, and they point to Raftel, a place so difficult to get to, it seems you can only find it using the poneglyphs. They must have been very good sailors, not just talented, but driven and determined, so explorers or adventurers. You've probably noticed that there's quite a bit of symmetry here. A king of a people who are explorers and adventurers, enemies of the world government with a connection to Raftel. Almost as if modern pirates are a reflection of the ancient kingdom, like it was an ancient kingdom of pirates. Do we have any other examples of there being some kind of larger, historical pirate culture? Pirate Island, the place where, according to legend, the Davy Back fight originated from. People have often wondered why Oda bothered to include such a seemingly unimportant and inconsequential story arc in the series. The most notable aspect of it was the introduction of Aokiji, and that has nothing to do with the Davy Back fight. If this arc was actually foreshadowing to the answer to one of the most important questions of the series, it's easy to see why it was included. This Pirate Island hasn't been seen in the series, and quite frankly, it's hard to imagine it existing in modern times. The Four Blues and Paradise seem too heavily controlled by the government for them to allow a place like Pirate Island to exist. True, places like Jaya exist, where pirates can walk around in the open, but I feel that's because they're too unimportant to bother with. I seriously doubt that the government would tolerate an island openly calling itself Pirate Island. As for the New World, it seems a bit too political to allow such a place to exist. Pirate Island is supposed to be a paradise for all pirates, but with the 4 emperors controlling their territories, it's hard to imagine them not fighting over it. For pirates, owning Pirate Island would be pretty important, turning that paradise into a battlefield. So I think Pirate Island is considered just a legend by those who know of it, something that never really existed. But in reality it was a real place, and it was destroyed by the government during the Void Century. But I have one more piece of evidence, though I admit I'm probably grasping at straws. The fact that CP9 shot Professor Clover before he could say the name of the kingdom. If the name was just some proper noun, like Alabaster or Dressrosa, just a string of syllables without any inherent meaning, then letting him say the name wouldn't have been such a big deal. The government tried to erase all knowledge of the ancient kingdom, so the name should be just as meaningless to both the readers and the people of the One Piece world. If it was just a name, then letting us hear it wouldn't have really changed anything. Therefore, the name has some implication that anyone could understand, that can't be erased, like Pirate Island. It's not the most solid evidence, but there you go. Anyway, if the Ancient Kingdom was a kingdom of pirates ruled by the Pirate King, how did you become the Pirate King? Well, let's take a look at the current situation. Right now, pirates are trying to get to Raftel and claim the One Piece. I think it's pretty reasonable to think ancient pirates did the same. Roger wasn't the first person to conquer the Grand Line and become Pirate King. He was only the first since the Void Century. Personally, it feels thematically correct that only the Pirate King and his crew should be able to set foot on Raftel. So, only a Pirate King could have left the secrets of the Void Century there. This is why the government went to such extremes to kill the child of Roger. If the title of Pirate King was just some meaningless nickname, then it's hard to see why they'd be willing to kill countless babies just because there's a possibility that they might be Roger's child. If Roger, the Pirate King, was somehow the reincarnation of their ancient enemy, then it makes more sense why they'd be so scared of Roger's bloodline. As for the Will of D, I feel that the D probably stands for Davy Jones, for whom the Davy Black fight is named after. He would have been the first Pirate King, the first person to actually find Raftel and the One Piece. When a person becomes Pirate King, he puts the D initial into his name. All the characters with the D initial are descendants of previous Pirate Kings, symbolically, though not necessarily genetically, descendants of Davy Jones. Hence why those with D in the name tend to cause so much trouble for the government. They are descendants of Pirate Kings, so they are special. But this doesn't undermine the idea that people should follow their dreams, because anyone who becomes Pirate King becomes a D, so it doesn't exclude non-Ds of being considered special. So those are my thoughts on the Ancient Kingdom. I doubt I'm the only one to think that it was Pirate Island, but I think I've put together a more convincing argument than most. Now for the secrets of the Void Century that the government fears. While the idea of a nation of pirates would be rather unsettling, it doesn't really threaten the government that much. I could easily see them turning it into propaganda. Early world government defeats evil pirate kingdom. No, I think this secret threatens the government on a very fundamental level. The secret is so damning that if it ever became public, the government would most likely not survive. That is the only way I can imagine the Five Elders justifying genocide to themselves. They believe that the government, the security and stability that it provides, is so important that no sacrifice is too high for its continued existence. They are wrong, of course, but that's why they're the villains. Since this secret is from the Void Century and involves the government, it's reasonable to assume that this secret has something to do with the founding of the government by the 20 Kings. The official story is that the 20 Kings formed the government, then 19 of them left their countries to become the first celestial dragons. Thanks to Clover, we now know more of the truth, that the 20 Kings defeated a powerful ancient kingdom before founding the government. But that doesn't really explain why they'd be willing to commit genocide. Robin already knows all that, so there must be more to it. Even if we insert our theory of the ancient kingdom being Pirate Island, there's no real threat to the government. So, what is the secret that the government fears so much? Well, I can't just tell you. Well, I could, but that wouldn't be very convincing. So, instead of trying to answer this question, let's instead ask more questions. Let's be skeptical. Let's question everything we know, or at least believe to know, to be true. What fact about the creation of the world government is both impossible to prove and, if false, has severe consequences for it? We don't need to doubt what Clover told us because we know he was honest in his search for the truth. We know that they founded the government and became celestial dragons because these things still exist today. We can't prove the exact number of kings is accurate, but it's hard to see exactly how that threatens the government. Personally, I feel that there is only one fact in this story that cannot be proven, and if contested, spells disaster for the government. Kings. How do we really know that these people were kings? History tells us that they were kings, but that's the history that the government wrote. All this tells us is that, at the time, the public believed that these 20 people were kings. If these people weren't actually kings, but criminals who have taken control of their kingdoms in dishonest ways, it's easy to see how this would threaten the government. I think the majority of people see the creation of the government like this. The kings created the world government for the good of all, then decided to make themselves celestial dragons as an afterthought, just to pat themselves on the back for a job well done. This revelation would make everything seem a lot less wholesome. The government was founded by corrupt criminals. They didn't care about the greater good, they just wanted to give themselves and their descendants absolute power that they had no right to have. If this became public, the celestial dragons would no longer be treated like the celestial dragons. Is anyone really going to respect their status when the ancestors they used to justify their actions were actually criminals who stole their power? All the people who have suffered at the hands of the celestial dragons would come after them, would want to make them suffer for the evil that they have inflicted on the world, just like in Doflamingo's backstory, but much worse. Not only that, but imagine how it would feel to be the celestial dragons in that situation. This doesn't just take away their power and status, it makes it so they should never have had it to begin with. It takes away their history, their identity, their pride. It destroys everything that they are. It's the perfect punishment. much more effective than just killing them or forcing them to become normal people. But the Celestial Dragons aren't the only ones to lose if this becomes public. It's hard to see the government being able to survive this controversy. For most people, the government are the good guys. This would open their eyes, make them see the government for the corrupt organisation it really is, committing genocide and maintaining a conspiracy against the people just to keep their dark truth a secret. People wouldn't trust the government. I could imagine a lot of countries deciding to leave and join the revolutionaries. And what about people working for the government directly? Are they really going to want to belong to such a system? I could see the more moral Marines wanting to quit in disgust. Meanwhile, absolute justice fanatics like Sakazuki would be devastated, practically brainwashed into believing that the government is unquestionably morally good. They wouldn't be able to comprehend the government being founded by criminals, and are the bad guys. Not to mention, this is all probably coming out after losing a battle to try and keep Luffy away from Raftel and their secret, so their morale would already be at rock bottom. So, if these people weren't actually kings, what were they? Well, pirates, obviously. This is a series all about pirates after all. Traitors who opposed their king, stealing countries to declare war on him, and when those countries had served their purpose, they abandoned them. Since the false kings had no actual history with their stolen countries, they had no problem giving them up for something better. All except Alabaster's royal family. Perhaps the false king of Alabaster enjoyed being a king? Perhaps he was actually on the side of the pirate king and warned him what was going on? That would explain why he was entrusted with a poneglyph despite being a founding member of the government. This does leave us with a small problem. If Alabaster was one of the stolen countries, then the Nefertari family aren't actually royalty by birth. They're as fake as the Celestial Dragons. Not quite. You see, the same way that Wapol was no longer the true king because of his actions, the Nefertari have proven themselves as wise, capable rulers for generations. They have earned their status, unlike the Celestial Dragons, and I feel the people would have no problem with them remaining in power. But this is a pretty big idea. Is there any evidence? Crocodile and Alabaster? Enel and Skypiea? Hody Jones and Fishman Island? Doflamingo and Dressrosa? Kaido and Wano? Even Drum, if you no longer consider Wapol the true king because of his actions. Time and time again, Oda has repeated the same subplot, a country being taken over that Luffy puts a stop to, be it during or after the takeover has happened. Now this could be a coincidence, Oda being lazy or unimaginative, but I feel it's too often repeated to be meaningless. Call it foreshadowing, or perhaps letting the reader get used to the idea of countries being taken over. So when it's revealed that this kind of evil scheme that Luffy has been fighting throughout his adventure is the backstory of the series, that this happened long ago and that they got away with it, it's not so hard to believe. So, 2 theories down, let's talk about what the One Piece actually is. The thing is, the One Piece doesn't really need to be anything. All it needs to do is make the Finder Pirate King, according to the traditions of the ancient pirate society. That's all Luffy is interested in. It's Robin's dream to find the ancient history and uncover the truth. So, let's try and keep it simple. Let's say it's a huge amount of traditional pirate treasure, gold and silver and gemstones, that sort of thing. Now, you may think that this is a bit of an anticlimax. After all, Luffy doesn't really care about that sort of treasure. But I feel this raises 2 questions that, when answered, will make this answer very satisfying. These questions are, first, where did this treasure come from? And second, what will Luffy do with it? Let's address the first question. I don't think that Roger left the One Piece on Raftel. I don't even think that the people of the Ancient Kingdom left it there. I think that the treasure of the One Piece is naturally occurring. This doesn't mean that I think gold and silver grows on trees on Raftel or anything. No, I think that the treasure washed up on the shores of Raftel. Due to underwater currents, nearly all the treasure lost at sea, given enough time, ends up on Raftel. With the Grand Line and its odd behaviour, it's easy to imagine some strange current that only affects heavy treasure, pushing it along until Raftel. But what about the Four Blues? How does treasure from those oceans get past the Red Line and Calm Belt to reach Raftel? Reverse Mountain. The first great physics-defying phenomena of the series that still hasn't been explained. But perhaps it's not quite as physics-breaking as it seems. I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So, compensating for anime physics, since there is a current that forces water to flow upwards from the Four Blues and into paradise, carrying any ships that float along the surface, then to balance it there would also be a second current, a current that takes water from the Four Blues, pulls it down under the mountain and then into the new world, one that carries things that sink, opposite to the one that carries things that float, carrying heavy treasure right to the shores of Raftel. Do I have any pieces of evidence for this? Just one. Remember my answer to who the people of the Ancient Kingdom were? That they were pirates from Pirate Island, who created the Davyback fight? Remember one of the traditions of the fight? Throwing coins into the sea. Symbolically there to tell Davy Jones about the Davyback fight, rather like an offering to a god. With Davy Jones being the first Pirate King to find the One Piece, throwing treasure into the ocean to become part of the Pirate King's treasure makes sense. So, treasure washes up on Raftel, big deal. Luffy doesn't care about gold and gems. But, to be fair, Luffy doesn't care about what the One Piece is at all. He just wants to be a Pirate King. Trying to be all subversive about it just takes focus away from the treasure's true purpose, to make Luffy Pirate King. My theory about the ancient pirate society gives depth and meaning to that purpose, rather than subvert it. But, it's not quite as simple as it seems, leading to my answer for the second question. What will Luffy do with the treasure? Well, I think it's pretty obvious what Luffy could do with it. He would take it, as much as he could carry, he could always come back for more, and he would sail around the world having adventures. He would make friends, throw parties, throwing his money around because, as we've just discussed, Luffy doesn't value money very highly. And everywhere he goes, people would see the Pirate King. See a charismatic, fun pirate who throws parties and spends a lot of money. People would love him, would be inspired by him, inspired to become pirates. Not the greedy, cruel pirates that prey upon civilians, but the fun-loving adventurers like Luffy and Shanks before him. Roger inspired a world of people to become pirates, but he inspired both kinds. He had a limited lifespan, so all he could do was put a big prize up for grabs and have faith that someone like Luffy would become the next Pirate King, rather than someone like Blackbeard. Meanwhile, Shanks inspired Luffy, and only Luffy, to be the right kind of pirate. Luffy will be the best of both worlds, inspire as many people as Roger did to become pirates, but like Shanks inspire them to be the right kind of pirate. But what you should be asking yourself is, what does this have to do with the One Piece? Like I said, Luffy doesn't care about gold and gems and that kind of treasure. He'd most likely spend it all on parties and food, or just give it away to people he likes. So, these newly inspired pirates would set sail with treasure in hand, meaning that they don't need to attack and rob civilians to support their adventures, making Luffy's style of being a pirate, where you just sail around and not hurt people, possible on a large scale. And it's sustainable. If a pirate runs low on treasure, he can try his luck fighting some other pirates to steal theirs. Other pirates would be fair game, and like Luffy, they wouldn't need to kill if they win. If you lose, your spirit is broken and you go back to farming or whatever. And while that's all happening, Davyback fights happen, ships sink, treasure falls back into the ocean and eventually return to Raftel and the One Piece. And when Luffy finally dies, there will be another race to Raftel to claim the One Piece and become Pirate King. And when the new Pirate King emerges, the cycle begins again. Potential pirates get treasure from the One Piece, the Pirate King, and each other, meaning they don't need to attack civilians, they don't need to raid trade ships or pillage towns. By simply doing what Luffy would want to do anyway, he creates a world where pirates and civilians can coexist peacefully. True, even after all that, there will probably be some violent pirates, but if Luffy inspires new pirates, gives them treasure, and defeats rogue pirates who would anger him, and the next Pirate King does the same, and so on, eventually the other kind of pirate would just fade completely. Oda has said that the treasure of the One Piece will be some physical thing, not the journey or friendship or anything like that. But it can be more than just physical. It's not the adventure Luffy has had getting to the One Piece, but the promise of future adventures. A central theme of the story of One Piece is the passing of the torch. Shanks saying he made a bet on the new generation, Whitebeard's death, Rayleigh training Luffy, Roger at his execution. The new generation replacing, surpassing the old, feels just as important as dreams and freedom. And so, When one generation has sailed the world to its heart's content, a new one begins with fresh eyes. The wonder and beauty of exploring the world is constantly being rediscovered, meaning that in another 100 years' time, in another 1,000, a young man can set sail, searching for adventure, dreaming of conquering the Grand Line and becoming Pirate King. A truly endless adventure. So, those are my theories. I'm not saying that they're perfect or the best ones out there, they're just the best I can come up with right now, and if I knew of any theories that I thought were better, I wouldn't have made this video. In my next One Piece video, I'll explain all the smaller theories that I have, but don't feel deserve their own videos. Thank you for watching, goodbye.